Alright, today's topic is achieving beneficial backwash. Yeah. First of all, let's remember what backwash effect means. Anybody who remembers backwash effect? Yeah, backwash effect means what? It's the effect of testing. The effect of testing on teaching and learning. So it might be positive and negative, and our aim as teachers is to achieve beneficial backwash effects so that students feel positive about taking tests, so that they learn something from the tests, so that they find them meaningful, right? Alright. Well, first we should test abilities whose development we want to encourage. Yeah. Especially if it is a speaking skill, we should give sufficient focus on speaking. It was my mistake when I worked at school in Taldykorgan. I prepared my Olympiad students for exams a lot. We took a lot of grammar and vocabulary tests. We took a lot of listening tests. We practiced a lot of writing. However, I didn't focus on speaking. And to my horror, I realized it when my students started speaking in the Olympiad. The girls from other school, they were very fluent. They spoke like it was like a charm. But my boys, they couldn't. Yeah, they did very well in tests, but they couldn't speak well. At that moment, I realized that I should have taught them how to speak. We should have practiced more. This is why try to focus on all skills, not only 2 or 3, but you should focus on all skills, and you should especially focus on the skill which is not sufficient. Yeah? Test what is important to test. Yeah? Don't focus on tiny things, don't focus on easy things. If they're very easy, just skip them, or don't include too many questions. Yeah, don't include too many easy questions. Instead, try to focus on more important issues. Yeah? Each ability should be given sufficient weight in relation to other abilities. Yeah, I partially mentioned it with my Olympiad students, but it's also true about general English courses. Sometimes teachers, instructors at university, yeah, they teach only the course book, but they don't focus on writing skill if the course book doesn't have a lot of writing. Yeah, this happens quite often. Or they don't read a lot. In my courses, I usually try to focus on 4 skills. I even divided evaluation into 4 parts, like listening, reading, speaking, and writing. We would write some essays, we would read some books, we would have reading circles where students had to read a certain book altogether. They were allocated different roles, and then they had to discuss it. Yeah, so try to include all 4 skills in your course. Sample widely and unpredictably. What does it mean? Yeah, students should not know beforehand the exact questions, maybe, or the exact topics. Topics are okay. I mean, the exact questions that you're going to ask. Like some of our teachers in MDE, yeah, MDE. For example, teachers of history, teachers of sociology, they keep using the same questions every year. I noticed that, and students, they just learn those questions by heart. They get those questions from the previous year students, and they score really well because they know what kind of questions they're going to have in their tests. This happens not only with MDE teachers, we even had this kind of teachers in our faculty, unfortunately. Who used the same questions every year. Well, you shouldn't do so. Try to use different questions. A wider range of tasks should be used in testing. Test across full range of the specifications. Yeah, and include questions from the previous units, not only the last 2 weeks units, but you should include topics from previous ones, like the 5th week, the 3rd week, yeah, the 7th week. So you should use different questions from different topics from different weeks. You shouldn't focus on the last 3 weeks. use direct testing, yeah, especially in productive skills. Yeah, you must use direct testing, because if you don't use direct testing, students will not be motivated to use it, to practice it. For speaking and writing, we should always use direct testing. And pronunciation, try to avoid using indirect testing. Try to avoid using odd one outs. Instead, have your students pronounce those words. Yeah, for example. Make testing criterion referenced. Yeah, not norm referenced. Yeah, especially at school. At school we don't use norm reference testing. At school we use criterion reference testing, where students have to achieve certain criteria, certain standards. Yeah, and everybody has a clear picture what they have to achieve. They don't compete with each other. They don't say that, well, I am better than, for example, Marat, and I will definitely get A because he isn't as good as me, or like the majority of students aren't as good as me. But if student competes against standards, he will try to improve. Yeah, he will try to achieve those standards, and he will always have a good goal. Yeah, a very high benchmark that he has to achieve. Base achievement tests on objectives, yeah, on learning outcomes of the course. Yeah, sometimes teachers forget that they do not base their tests on achievements, on learning outcomes. They base them on something else. But this is one of the key issues in assessment. Yeah, so there should be a triangle. Yeah, we said, and it should align. Learning objectives on the top, they're very important. Then learning activities that you use. Sometimes they call it methodology or pedagogy. Yeah, so activities that you do in class, and assessments. So they all three must align. They all three must match. Do not base achievement tests on detailed teaching. Yeah, it shouldn't be very detailed. If it's too detailed, if you focus on tiny words, I don't know, which are not very important, well, it will have a negative backwash effect. Make sure that you try to test useful words. Yeah, and I sometimes even check the word in a dictionary. Well, Oxford dictionaries, they have a very nice feature. They show how active the word is, and they show it like in the first 1,000, in the second 1,000, in the third 1,000, and so on. The most active words might be highlighted with a different color. So when I designed vocabulary tests, when I constructed them, I paid attention to how important, how useful those words are. I would try to avoid using a lot of inactive words, yeah, that might not be very useful for my students. All right. And constant pressure to achieve objectives of course will contribute to beneficial backwash, yeah, because if you show the objectives and if you show the standards that students have to achieve, students will have to push themselves to achieve them. I gave another example about my second year students, if you remember, where I set the objective. I said, well, if you are upper intermediate level students, you are supposed to pass FCE, first certificate in English. A very nice test, by the way. But the majority of students didn't do really well. However, a lot of students realized that they aren't as good as they should be. Yeah, it was like an eye-opener. Like, wow, I used to think that I was good at English, but I'm not as good as I should be. This is the standard. I'm behind that standard. I'm falling behind. Yeah. All right. Ensure a test is known and understood by students and teachers. Yeah. Make sure that you use techniques which are appropriate, yeah, and students know how to paraphrase the sentence, for example, if you're using it in your high-stake exams like midterm or final. If you're going to use this kind of technique, well, make sure that you have practiced it beforehand, yeah, or at least you hand it out test samples so the students know what it's going to look like. But ideally, you should have practiced it before the midterm or final exam. Where necessary, provide assistance to teachers. Yeah, especially if teachers are not aware how to evaluate students, and especially their productive skills. Yeah. So you should provide training how to evaluate. You should provide training with rubrics. You should provide training with behavior that raters that teachers should demonstrate while students are being tested. While students are tested, yeah. For example, they should be friendly. They should smile. Yeah. They should start with easy questions in speaking. Yeah. They shouldn't start with very difficult questions from the very beginning. They should speak slowly enough. Their pronunciation should be clear. Yeah. There are a lot of details like this, and raters should be trained. And for example, students should not see how teachers evaluate them. Teachers actually should not take notes. Ideally, they shouldn't take notes. If they are taking notes, they must cover and hide them so that the student doesn't see what kind of notes you're taking. Otherwise, the student will be, the teacher is evaluating me. Oh, gosh, what did they say? Did they say something wrong because she wrote something? Yeah, she wrote something down there. Gosh, what is she writing there? Yeah? So the students will be distracted. Yeah? For this reason, we are not, when we are evaluated in IELTS, for example, yeah, we are usually recorded. If you noticed, there is just a recorder, and they record us. They don't take any notes. As far as I see, if they do it inconspicuously. Yeah, we don't see raters taking notes, yeah, on us. Counting the costs, yeah. Well, of course, every test should be practical, yeah. From Dr. Tuzi's presentation, if you remember, yeah, every test should be practical, and it shouldn't be very expensive. You cannot practice IELTS in every progress test, or even in midterm exam maybe, or final, because it might be very difficult and to construct. It might be quite expensive to conduct, yeah, in terms of time and energy. So you should balance, yeah. You should balance between practicality, authenticity, and usefulness, yeah. So a good test should be easy and cheap to construct, administer, conduct, score, evaluate, and interpret, yeah, and interpret the results. So how difficult it was, what topics students have, for example, what topics students find difficult, yeah. So you must always interpret test results. You shouldn't only give the grades, but you should also evaluate, right? Analyze the results. All right, let's continue with the second lecture, stages of test construction. Stages of test development. Yeah, how should we develop a test? Well, the rule of thumb is this: test development is best carried out in a team. Yeah. Why? Because a person might think that he has created a very nice test, but in reality he might have missed very important aspects, or the question might be interpreted in 2 or even 3 different ways. This is why the best way to create tests is in a team. You can even divide responsibilities among each other. For example, one teacher will develop questions on reading, another teacher will create questions on listening, yeah, reading and writing, yeah. The other 2 teachers will create questions on reading and writing. Yeah, writing test items is a creative process, of course. Yeah, you must have very good creativity. If you are writing your own sentences, yeah, for example, for vocabulary or grammar. But you can also use dictionaries. I sometimes use dictionaries I use examples from dictionaries, because they are 100% correct. They are validated, they were validated. So this is why I sometimes use examples from dictionaries. Why not? I also use a site, context, reversal context something. So they give example sentences from novels, from stories, authentic ones, and I sometimes use that site as well when I want my test to be authentic and sound native-like. Be open to accept justified criticism, because no one is perfect, nobody is perfect, everybody can make a mistake. This is totally fine. So be ready to accept criticism. Your colleagues might say that your item is too difficult or too easy, or it's not authentic enough. It's quite fine. Just be ready and try to foresee. Try to predict possible interpretations, especially if it is odd one out, or because sometimes we can come up with different interpretations. I once came out with a positive and negative, but it was a different interpretation. Well, the test constructor thought that there should have been a difference between the objects that we can touch and that we cannot touch. But I assumed it as positive and negative words, so I interpreted it in different way. So make sure that, especially in odd one out technique, that there is only one way of interpretation, right? Or instructions. Sometimes teachers write incorrect instructions. Students misunderstand and they do it in their own way. Again, this is why we should include examples, especially for difficult parts like paraphrase a sentence. You should include one example. First, stating the problem. First, before designing a test, you should state the problem, and you should answer these questions before creating a test. Please, let's read them. I will not read them all. Read them by yourselves. After that, we should continue with writing specifications for the test. And first we should pay attention to content. And these are the points concerning the content. Operations. What kind of operations I'm going to use? Scanning, skimming, guessing from the context. I usually ask myself this question when I see a very interesting text. When I read the text and I think, wow, it's a great text. I could use it with my students. I could design this kind of question. I could use it for scanning technique because there are a lot of numbers, there are a lot of names and places. That would be a very good text for scanning technique. And then I would add, I would ask my students to guess the words from the context. This is a very nice sentence. Sometimes I just think it to myself. So you should think about these aspects when you design a test, especially a reading, for example, a reading text. The length of the text, how long it should be, the topic, readability, is it easy to read, is it easy enough to read, vocabulary range, style, maybe it's not very appropriate, maybe it's too academic, or vice versa, maybe it's too colloquial and students might not be able to read it. Next, structure, timing, and techniques. Test structure. How many parts are you going to have it? 2, 3, 4. Number of items, number of questions. 30, 50. How many? Number of passages, reading passages. Are you going to have only one reading passage? Or 3, like in IELTS, for example. Medium and channel, paper-based, computer-based, or face-to-face. Yeah. Timing, how much time you should spend. I told you one technique, if you remember. Well, one student asked me, how do we know how much time do our students need for a test? Well, the rule of the thumb is you take this test by yourself, you time yourself, and then you double that time. So if you finish the test in 20 minutes, it means that your students will most probably finish it in 40 minutes. Yeah. So this is the rule of thumb. Or you can allocate 1 minute per question. So if there are 50 questions, you can allocate 50 minutes. This should be quite enough, because students will answer easy questions first. They will save a lot of time by doing so and spend the rest on more difficult ones. And you should also, of course, teach your students to these techniques, testing techniques, that they should start with easy questions first, especially multiple choice, and then they should continue with more difficult ones. The most difficult should be left for the very last minutes, because you might not have enough time to answer easy questions if you focus on difficult questions first. Yeah, they can waste all their time on difficult questions, and they will score really badly in their test. Yeah, and techniques that you should also think about techniques that you're going to use. Yeah, so skills, sub-skills, paraphrase, fill in the gaps. Yeah. You should also think about criteria. Yeah, criteria performance. And again, the rule of thumb is if students score 80% in that test, it means that they are very successful. They're quite successful. Yeah. In progress tests or in placement tests, for example, if student scores 80%, it means that he has achieved that level. Use more specific rubrics for productive skills. This is what? This is speaking, for example. Accuracy, or it might be writing as well, actually. Yeah, accuracy, appropriacy, range. Range means how rich the language is in terms of vocabulary or in terms of grammar. Flexibility, initiate and concede the conversation. So this is for speaking part. So the student can start the conversation. Or adapt to new topics and changes of direction easily. Yeah. And size, the answers should be long enough. It should be only yes, no, thank you. Yeah, the answer should be long. Writing and moderating items. Yeah, first, sampling. Yeah, sampling means choosing. Yeah, sampling, choosing. Choose items with content, validity, and beneficial backwash. Yeah. Do not test what is easy to test again. Yeah. Test what is important and useful to test. Writing items. Write with specifications in mind. Look through the eyes of test takers. Provide keys. And writing successful items is extremely difficult. Yeah, you should know that. And you shouldn't design a test just a few days before the final exam. Ideally, you should start earlier, because you have to revise it over and over again. No one can expect to consistently produce perfect items. Yeah, you can make mistakes sometimes, and some items will have to be rejected. Yeah, and you have to show these items to your colleagues, of course. And if they think that the item isn't good enough, or if it might be interpreted in different ways, maybe you should reject the item, totally reject, cancel it, or improved. Yeah, if you think that the item is worth it, you can improve it. And it's moderating items by at least 2 colleagues, neither of whom is the author of the items. Yeah, you should show your test, like pre-final version, to your colleagues. And it's very important that those colleagues should not be the ones who actually work in that team. Why? Because they keep seeing these questions every day, and they might not actually notice those mistakes. It's like we see something wrong on the way home, for example. Let's say there is a hole on the road. The first time we notice it, but after some time, when we see it for the second, third, fourth, and 20th time, we start actually not seeing it. We just don't see it anymore. Yeah. So this is why you use fresh minds to moderate your items. Informal trialing of items on native speakers. Well, if you have a native speakers at your disposal, it's a very good idea to trial your test on them. Yeah? So they take this test, they take your test and see how good it is, how authentic it is, how correct it is. Yeah. Well, if you have like 20 or more, I don't know, maybe you could conduct it online, but yeah, conducting it online might not be actually very practical in terms of information leakage. Yeah, students can maybe find your tests online. This is why if you don't have native speakers at your disposal, then you'll trial it only on non-native speakers. Native speakers should be similar to the target population. Yeah, if you're going to conduct it among teenagers, ideally they should also be teenagers. Yeah, students, for example. Yeah, and they don't have to be experts like teachers. Yeah. Then you should trial your test on non-native speakers. Yeah. However, trialing on non-native speakers is often not feasible. So, because group is not available, and for security reasons, yeah, again, there might be a leak of information. If they have some friends, they will tell, look, we had a test the other day, and I think the teacher is going to conduct it, with you. So, it happens quite often. So why do we do it? Because we want to find mistakes in our tests. Yeah, because faults are often discovered only after the test has been administered to a target group. It's like it's what happens in Kazakhstan actually when they publish books. They don't trial them because there is a very strong lobby of some groups. They just publish a book. They want to sell it. They sell it to the Ministry of Education, and then Ministry of Education publishes it. Yeah, and they apply it to all schools. And when students start learning, only then do they notice that there are a lot of tons of mistakes in those course books. Yeah, there is a severe criticism on this issue, which is totally justifiable. I totally agree with them. A lot of books are horrible nowadays. Yeah, in the updated curriculum. English books are okay. English course books are really good because they were developed by companies, by native speakers who have very good experience in writing books. However, the other ones are not as good. Yeah. Well, there are some good books in history, as far as I know. But in some subjects, like maybe Kazakh or Russian, teachers are not happy with them. They criticize books a lot. All right. Analysis of results of the trial, making necessary changes. Yeah, after you have conducted those tests, of course, you should analyze. Yeah, you can analyze it statistically. If, for example, 70% of students made a mistake on a specific item, and they made 70% of them answered B, which is a wrong answer, it might mean that B is a very strong distractor. It's too strong. It's so strong that it actually is believed to be the correct answer by students. Maybe you should change this distractor. Maybe actually it sounds or very similar. It might be alternative answer. Yeah, alternative correct answer. This is why you should replace this distractor with a weaker one. Yeah. So there are two ways of analysis: statistical or qualitative. Items must be examined for misinterpretations. Unanticipated but possibly correct answers, faulty items sometimes. Calibration of scales. This is very important. And a lot of students actually don't understand what calibration means. Calibrating of scales. Scales, we know years ago. Now we have electronic scales, but years ago we used to have scales like this. So you would put your what you buy in the shop, for example, apples, on one part, and then you would put what is called giri, and you would scale them this way. They had to match. So the same should happen in assessment. What does it mean? If there are 2 or 3 evaluators, they should evaluate in a similar way. So we talked about intra-rater reliability, but in this term, inter-rater reliability. We should focus attention on inter-rater reliability. That rater A, B, and C, they score the same test, the same writing part, for example, in a similar way. That the evaluation doesn't deviate a lot. How can we do it? Well, first we should provide rubrics, very detailed rubrics, and they should be the same. Everybody, rater A, B, and C, they should be the same rubrics. Then we should collect samples of performance. We should find an essay A, essay B, C, and D, and F from the internet, for example, and we should agree that this is essay A, this is a sample of essay A, this is a sample of essay B, C, and D, and F. So we have samples, we have a picture of what the work should look like. We have rubrics, and only then should we start evaluating. So you should use this scale, later. So you should use the rubrics and those examples, and in this way you'll make sure that the points that you give will not deviate a lot. That rater A, B, and C will give similar grades to the same work, for example. All right. Validation. Validate the final version of the tests. So validation means trial it. Especially for high-stake exams. If you remember, I mentioned it about the final, not the final exam. I mentioned it about Olympiad exam, which SDU organized among 11th graders. So we validated it. So we selected 3 or 4 D, C, B, and A students, but we didn't tell them that it was Olympiad exam, of course. We would put them in the same room. We would make sure that they didn't cheat. We would make sure that there was only 1 student per desk. We would distribute it, then we would conduct it. And of course we asked our students to do their best, to perform their best. And so we found out that the test was very valid, because D student scored as a D student like 50, 55, C, B, and A scored accordingly. So this way we validated, we tested our tests. We tested that it actually has high content validity, that it has, but we didn't test it for reliability. We didn't test it again because we didn't want again the leak of information, so we could have tested it like split test, but we didn't. We tested only validity those days. So if it's high stake exam, if you can validate it, it's good. Well, if you cannot do it, well, it's a pity if you can't do it. But low stake exams, of course, they don't need validation. Quizzes, because they are low stake exams, they can be compensated by other tests or they do not weigh a lot, yeah, or like 5% maybe, or 10% of the whole evaluation rubric, yeah. All right. Writing handbooks for test takers, yeah. You can even write handbooks, yeah, for test takers. How to take a test, how to score well. You can describe the test. You can give samples of a test. Like in the final exam, you'll have a paraphrase technique, so practice it. These are the examples. Yeah, you'll have 50 minutes for, I don't know, for each part or whatever. Yeah, you'll listen track twice, or you'll listen track once. So this is very important information. Yeah, and you should also write handbook not only for test takers but for the staff, for evaluators, for raters, for teachers. Yeah, and of course you should train your staff. Yeah, you should train teachers, especially for interview parts. Yeah, everybody should be trained. Interviewers, raters, scorers, computer operators, proctors. Proctors are people who are just checking if students are not cheating or not. Yeah, so proctors should also be friendly. Yeah, they should not make a lot of noise. They should not attract a lot of attention. Yeah, they should be polite. Alright, well, this is it. This is the end of our lecture. Thank you for joining.